A simple human reflex could shake an entire empire. A hall full of weapons freezes at a single embrace, and the queen, she smiles. The first thing they told me before stepping into the royal hall of the Avarin Imperium was simple. Do not touch anything, anyone, or any surface that looks even remotely important. Considering every surface shimmered with ceremonial importance, it was the least comforting advice I had ever received. The doors parted without sound, folding into themselves like obedient thoughts. I stepped forward alone, because apparently humanity had decided that sending one moderately qualified diplomat was less threatening than sending a fleet. The floor beneath my boots hummed with a low harmonic vibration, some kind of gravity-balancing field that kept the air perfectly still. Even my breath felt organized. Across the vast chamber, she stood, Queen Aralyth of the Avarin. She looked almost human at first glance, tall, poised, her posture effortless. But no human skin carried that deep cerulean glow, as if the ocean had decided to learn how to stand upright. Long ears arched elegantly from her head, sweeping back like living crescents. They were adorned with thin metallic rings that pulsed faintly with internal light. Her red hair fell over her shoulders in controlled waves, strands woven with filament threads that flickered like quiet embers. When she turned her head, the light shifted across her features with mathematical precision. I reminded myself to bow, slowly, respectfully, without tripping. Behind her, a semicircle of soldiers stood in flawless symmetry, armored in silver-black plating that seemed grown rather than forged. Their weapons rested at their sides, long spears of condensed energy humming softly. I tried not to stare at the weapons. I failed immediately. A translucent orb drifted near my shoulder, my assigned diplomatic assistant AI. It projected text directly into my retinal display. Reminder, avoid physical contact, avoid sudden movements, avoid humor. Define humor, I muttered under my breath. Do not. Right. Excellent. The queen stepped forward, and the hall responded to her movement as though reality itself had rehearsed the choreography. A faint shift in gravity made my stomach tilt. I resisted the urge to grab onto something important-looking, which was everything. Her voice entered my mind a fraction of a second before the translator rendered it audible. "Representative Hail of Earth," she said. The sound was melodic, layered, almost harmonic. "Welcome." I bowed, not too deep, not too shallow. I had practiced the angle for weeks in front of a mirror while a committee argued about degrees. "It is an honor," I replied, praying my voice would not crack and initiate a galactic misunderstanding. She inclined her head slightly. Her long ears moved with the motion, the rings chiming softly as they shifted. I took one careful step forward. The floor vibrated. It was subtle. A fluctuation, a ripple in the gravity field. My boots lost friction for half a heartbeat. At the same moment, the queen's posture faltered, just barely. A fractional shift, as though the world had tilted half a degree too far. Human reflex is older than diplomacy. I reached out. My hands found her shoulders. And then, because gravity enjoys a sense of humor, we both moved forward at once. I caught her fully, arms wrapping around her before my brain could file a formal objection. She was warm, solid, real. The bioluminescent threads in her hair brightened sharply at contact. The chamber went silent. Behind her, 12 soldiers raised their weapons in perfect synchronization. The hum of energy intensified, a rising harmonic that made the air feel thin. My AI orb flashed crimson in my vision. Critical protocol violation. "Yes," I whispered faintly. "I noticed. I became acutely aware that I was hugging the sovereign ruler of an interstellar empire. I began, still holding her because apparently my arms had forgotten how to disengage. Apologies. Gravity, very persuasive gravity. The translation system hesitated for a full second before broadcasting my words across the chamber. I watched the soldiers' helmeted heads tilt slightly. The queen did not struggle. She did not recoil. Instead, she looked up at me. Her eyes were not human. They held depth beyond color, faint geometric patterns shifting beneath the surface like distant constellations recalculating themselves. For one impossible moment, we simply stared at each other. Then she smiled. It was not a diplomatic smile, not the rehearsed expression of ceremony. It was small, curious, almost amused. A soft sound escaped her, something between a laugh and a chime. The soldiers froze, the energy hum lowered by half a tone. "You have stabilized me," she said gently, still within my arms. "Yes," I replied weakly. "I specialize in emergency stabilization, mostly accidental." The translation rendered that faithfully. I saw one soldier's weapon dip a few millimeters, her ears angled slightly forward, the rings along them glowing brighter. "Among my people," she continued, "physical contact is reserved for medical emergencies or family." "That tracks," I said. "I promise I am neither." Silence. I realized I was still holding her. "May I disengage?" I asked carefully. Another pause from the translator. Her smile widened just enough to be dangerous. "You may." I stepped back as if diffusing a bomb made of etiquette. My hands lifted slowly into view, empty and non-threatening. The soldiers did not lower their weapons entirely, but they stopped aiming them directly at my internal organs, which felt like progress. "My apologies, Your Majesty," I said more formally. "Human reflex response. When someone appears to fall, we attempt to prevent that." She studied me with an intensity that felt like being scanned by a starship. I suspected I was. "Your reflex was immediate," she observed. "Yes. We are enthusiastic about gravity-related crises." A faint ripple moved through the chamber. It took me a moment to realize it was not machinery. It was the subtle shift of alien observers reacting. Not laughter exactly, but something close. The Queen turned slightly, addressing her soldiers without looking away from me. "Stand down." They obeyed instantly. The weapons powered down with a synchronized sigh. My AI orb shifted from crimson to cautious amber. Tension level reduced by 34%. "Only 34, I muttered. "I have never been greeted in such a manner," the Queen said, returning her full attention to me. "I assure you it was not premeditated," I replied. "Our strategic briefings did not include embrace the monarch." Her eyes flickered with what might have been delight. "That is unfortunate. It was unexpected." There was a long moment where protocol hung in the air, uncertain what to do with itself. Finally, she extended one blue hand toward me, not to be held, but in formal presentation. I bowed again, this time keeping my limbs strictly to myself. "Let it be recorded," she said, her voice carrying across the hall, "that the human representative acted not in aggression, but in instinct." A subtle murmur passed through unseen observers, and, she added, glancing at me sideways with surprising structural support. "I train," I said solemnly. "Occasionally." A faint, unmistakable laugh echoed from her. It was bright, resonant, and entirely unscripted. The gravity field stabilized completely. The tension in the chamber eased, not vanishing, but reshaping itself into something curious. For the first time since entering, I allowed myself to breathe normally. She regarded me for another long second. "Walk with me, Representative Hale." The words were simple, but the reaction among the soldiers was immediate. A subtle tightening of posture, a recalculation. I hesitated only half a beat before nodding. "Of course." We began to move side by side across the vast chamber floor. No barrier shimmered between us now. "Tell me," she said quietly, so only I could hear, "do all humans respond to instability by embracing it?" "Only the brave ones," I replied. "The rest write strongly worded reports." Her eyes flashed again with that strange inner geometry. "Then perhaps," she murmured, "your species will prove interesting." Behind us, the hall resumed its low, ceremonial hum. Above, unseen mechanisms recalculated diplomatic projections. Probability curves shifted. Outcomes adjusted. I kept my hands firmly at my sides. But when she glanced at me again, there was still that smile lingering on her lips. And somehow, impossibly, the coldest room in the galaxy felt warmer. The official statement released by the Averin Imperium described the incident as a spontaneous gravitational stabilization exchange. Earth's media called it the hug heard across the spiral arm. By the time I was escorted from the Grand Hall to a private transit corridor, My retinal display was overflowing with encrypted messages from Earth Command, 16 diplomatic oversight committees, and one message from my mother that simply read, "I told you to keep your hands to yourself." "I did," I muttered under my breath. "Briefly." "You are speaking again to unseen entities," Queen Aralyth observed beside me. "Just my species," I replied. We panicked communally. We moved through a corridor that curved gently upward, the architecture flowing like frozen waves. The walls shimmered with embedded data streams, living histories, I was told. Every treaty, every war, every coronation recorded in crystalline matrices. As we walked, faint symbols rippled beneath the surface, responding to her presence. "I have ordered a pause in formal negotiations," she said calmly. That sentence could mean several terrible things. "Is that," I asked carefully, "a prelude to exile or execution?" She glanced at me, one long ear tilting slightly. "Execution would require considerably more paperwork." Reassuring. "It is a prelude to conversation." That was worse. We entered a smaller chamber where the gravity felt softer, less absolute. The air carried a faint harmonic resonance that made my thoughts feel oddly synchronized. A hovering platform adjusted to our height automatically. When she stepped onto it, it responded with a subtle glow. When I stepped on, it recalibrated twice, as if uncertain about my structural integrity. "Comfortable?" she asked. "I believe it's measuring my density." "It is. Should I be offended?" "Only if it rejects you." The platform did not eject me into space, which I took as a diplomatic victory. A translucent interface unfolded between us, projecting shifting star maps. Points of light pulsed along contested borders. Trade routes glowed in delicate threads. I recognized Earth's position, small, newly luminous, like a nervous student seated among ancient scholars. "You destabilized more than my footing," she said quietly. I swallowed. "I assumed as much." "In our culture," she continued, "touch is intimate. It signifies trust beyond politics or vulnerability." "I promise I wasn't attempting either," I said quickly. "It was strictly a gravity-based emergency response." Her lips curved again. "You repeat this as if gravity were a co-conspirator." "It often is." She studied me in silence, those shifting constellations in her eyes recalculating something deeper than trajectory. "My advisors insist that your action was either a calculated display of dominance," she said, "or evidence that humans lack impulse control. We can multitask." She laughed, softly this time, but without restraint. The sound seemed to ripple through the chamber's harmonic field, altering its tone. "You are aware," she added, "that 12 of my royal guard nearly vaporized you." "Yes, I tried not to make eye contact with the glowing weapons. They were set to defensive cascade mode." "That sounds enthusiastic. It would have disassembled you at the molecular level." I blinked. "Ah, that explains the humming." She watched my reaction closely. "I should be angry," she said after a moment. "That would be fair. I should consider it an insult to my authority. That would also be understandable." She stepped closer, not touching, but within the perimeter of personal space I suspected no one else occupied. The platform adjusted again, equalizing our height perfectly. "But when you held me," she continued, her voice lower now, "there was no aggression, no calculation, only instinct." I hesitated. "Where I come from, when someone stumbles, you catch them. It's not strategy, it's reflex. Even if that someone rules half the quadrant?" "Especially then," I said. "Rulers probably have fewer people willing to steady them." Her ears shifted forward slightly. The metallic rings along them emitted a faint harmonic chime. "You speak dangerously," she murmured. "I've been told." A soft pulse radiated through the chamber as an AI presence materialized, an Averin advisory construct, its form a lattice of light. "Your Majesty," it intoned, "probability matrices indicate a 38% increase in political volatility following the stabilization event." "Only 38?" I asked hopefully. The lattice turned toward me. "Human, your species is difficult to model. Story of our lives." Aralyth raised one hand, silencing the construct. "And what do the matrices say regarding long-term cooperative alignment?" The lattice flickered. "Unexpectedly favorable. Emotional exchange variables have altered trust projections. I looked at her. She looked at the lattice. Emotional exchange, she repeated thoughtfully. That's a very elegant term for oops, I offered. She dismissed the construct with a subtle gesture. It dissolved into light. Silence settled between us, not heavy but attentive. You understand, she said, that if I publicly condemn you, the Imperium will stabilize. And if you do, then I signal that humanity may approach us differently. I winced. Differently how? Without distance. That tends to be our brand. She circled slowly, studying me as though I were a newly discovered element. Your people are technologically inferior, she said matter-of-factly, painfully aware. Your fleets are smaller. We compensate with optimism. Your political systems are fragmented. We call that diversity. Another faint laugh escaped her. And yet, she continued, you crossed a boundary none of my own nobles would dare. I tripped across it. That does not diminish the crossing. I considered that. May I ask something? You may. When was the last time someone touched you without ceremony? She did not answer immediately. The harmonic field in the chamber shifted lower, more contemplative. Before my coronation, she said at last, when I was still permitted to be unguarded. And now I am an axis, others orbit. That sounds lonely. Her gaze sharpened slightly, not offended, but pierced. Loneliness, she said, is an inefficient emotion. We're very efficient at it. She stopped in front of me again. Tell me, Representative Hale, if I were to stumble again, would you repeat your reflex? I hesitated exactly one heartbeat. Yes, even knowing the weapons. Even knowing the consequences. Her eyes brightened. Fascinating, she whispered. The chamber lights dimmed subtly as an alert pulsed through the walls. A faint tremor passed beneath our feet, not instability, but an external disturbance. Minor sabotage attempt in the outer docking ring. Her internal systems reported calmly through the air. Timing is everything, I muttered. She didn't look alarmed. If anything, she looked resolved. Some among my council prefer hostility, she said. Peace threatens their influence. Earth has a few of those too. The tremor faded. Defensive systems engaged somewhere far beyond the chamber. You are a complication, she said. I try to keep things interesting. She stepped even closer now, close enough that I could see the faint bioluminescent patterns beneath her blue skin shifting like living circuitry. You may have altered more than a diplomatic session today, she said quietly. Your Majesty, with respect, I barely altered my footing. She reached out slowly this time and placed her hand lightly against my forearm. It was deliberate. Controlled, publicly deniable, perhaps, but intentional. The platform beneath us registered the contact and pulsed with a soft glow. My retinal display went wild. Unknown variable introduced. I am not falling, she said calmly. I noticed, yet I am choosing contact. The words settled between us with more weight than the earlier embrace. Outside this chamber, fleets orbited, soldiers recalibrated, councils debated. Inside, there was only the faint hum of alien technology and the warmth of her hand against my sleeve. You destabilize systems, she said softly. Gravity again? No, she replied. Expectation. For the first time since arriving, I felt something shift, not in the room, not in the politics, but in the space between us. Then perhaps, I said carefully, expectation could use a little destabilizing. Her smile returned, slow, luminous, unmistakably genuine. Perhaps, she agreed. By the time the second sabotage attempt hit, I had learned two things about the Avarin Imperium. First, their security systems were elegant, precise, and terrifyingly efficient. Second, elegance did not prevent internal stupidity. The alert rippled through the palace like a stone dropped into still water. Light along the walls shifted from ceremonial gold to sharp white. The harmonic hum deepened, recalibrating into defensive frequencies. Somewhere beyond the capital's spire, a detonation flared briefly against the orbital shield grid. I stood beside Queen Aralyth in the central negotiation chamber, no longer separated from her by invisible barriers. That alone had already unsettled half her council. Docking ring 7 reports coordinated interference, one of her advisors announced. His voice filtered through a hovering prism of light. Energy signatures match dissident factions within the third conclave. Internal, I muttered. Bold. Aralyth's long ears angled slightly backward, metallic rings along them glowing in restrained pulses. They test resolve, she said calmly. A projection expanded between us, orbital schematics, fleet positions, civilian traffic lanes. A cluster of unauthorized vessels darted along the perimeter, broadcasting fragmented rhetoric about purity and tradition. I glanced at her. They don't like hugs. They do not like unpredictability, she corrected. Same thing. The chamber doors opened as members of the High Council entered in a sweep of formal garments and layered authority. Their gazes flicked between the projection and me with undisguised calculation. This is the consequence, one counselor declared sharply. Your Majesty's tolerance emboldens instability. Ah, we had reached the blame the human phase. Classic. Aralyth did not look at them. Her eyes remained on the projection. The instability predates Representative Hale, yet it accelerates under his influence. I raised a hand slightly. In fairness, I accelerate most situations simply by existing. No one laughed. Aralyth did. The sound cut cleanly through the tension, not mocking, not dismissive, simply certain. The dissidents expected outrage, she said. They expected condemnation. They expected me to reaffirm distance. Her gaze shifted toward me briefly. I will not. A faint murmur passed through the council. Another tremor vibrated the palace structure as defensive satellites activated. Through the projection, I saw one of the rogue vessels disable itself rather than fire on civilian traffic. That was interesting. They are divided, I said quietly. Some of them don't want war. Aralyth studied the data, then nodded once. Open a channel. The advisors stiffened. Your Majesty, open it. The projection shifted to a live feed. The interior of a dissident command vessel appeared dim, crowded, faces tense. Averin officers in older armor stared back at their queen. You destabilized the Imperium, their leader said immediately. Aralyth stepped forward into the projection's focal field. Her blue skin glowed steadily, her red hair shimmered faintly in the defensive lighting. The Imperium is not destabilized by contact, she replied. It is destabilized by fear. You abandon tradition. I evolve it. Their leader's gaze flicked toward me. For a mammal, I opened my mouth. Aralyth lifted one hand slightly without looking back. I closed it. I evolve it for survival, she said. For alliance. For a future in which our children do not memorize war. A pause. A flicker of hesitation across several dissident faces. Behind me, my retinal display flooded with Earth command updates. Human ships had shifted position, not aggressively, but protectively. Civilian evacuation corridors were being coordinated through shared AI protocols. Earth had not mobilized for retaliation. We had mobilized for assistance. I swallowed. Aralyth saw the same data in her projection. I watched her expression change, not dramatically, but subtly. The geometric constellations in her eyes shifted pattern. Your assumption, she continued to the dissidents, was that humanity would exploit tension. Instead, they shield our civilians. The dissident leader hesitated. A strategic maneuver. Perhaps, she allowed, or perhaps instinct. There it was again, instinct. The word hung between star systems. One of the younger dissident officers leaned toward their commander. If we fire, we strike our own transport lanes, they murmured. The leader's jaw tightened. You risk fracture, he said to Aralyth. I risk stagnation if I do not, she replied. Silence stretched across the channel. Then, slowly, one by one, the unauthorized vessels powered down their weapons. Energy signatures dimmed. Engines shifted from attack vectors to holding patterns. The leader exhaled visibly. We will withdraw, he said at last. For now. The channel closed. The chamber remained utterly still. Then the defensive alert tones softened. Orbital shields recalibrated to standard levels. The harsh white lighting warmed back to gold. The counselors exchanged uncertain looks. You chose dialogue, one said quietly. I chose strength without annihilation, Aralyth corrected. She turned to face them fully. We have relied upon distance as proof of superiority. Today we demonstrated that control does not require isolation. Her gaze swept the chamber, lingering only briefly on me. This is not weakness, she continued. It is expansion. The council fell silent. One by one, they inclined their heads, not deeply but enough. Crisis averted. I exhaled a breath I had not realized I was holding. Well, I said lightly, that went significantly better than the molecular disassembly scenario. A faint ripple of subdued amusement passed through the chamber this time. Aralyth approached me once the council dispersed. The vast space felt different now, not colder, not tense, just altered. You have changed the trajectory of this alliance, she said quietly. I mostly just stood here, I replied. You stood here without fear. That is debatable. She stepped closer, no hesitation now. When you first arrived, she continued, you were cautious, reactive, apologetic. Still apologetic. Now you speak as though you belong in this chamber. I considered that, she was right. The weight of the room no longer pressed against my lungs. The soldiers behind her no longer watched me as if calculating my disassembly time. Even the harmonic hum of the palace felt less alien. I suppose, I said slowly, I stopped worrying about doing everything correctly. Her ears tilted forward slightly, and began doing what felt right. Her eyes brightened. That, she said, is destabilizing. Good destabilizing. She nodded once. A notification pulsed through the chamber, Earth and Avarin fleets synchronizing navigation protocols. Trade corridors reopening. Joint research committees authorized. Formal alliance pending ratification. I looked at the projection. So we're not at war. No, excellent, I was not emotionally prepared. You hide fear with humor, she observed. Constantly. Why? I hesitated. Because fear spreads faster than laughter, I said finally. If I can shift the tone, even slightly, maybe people breathe long enough to think. She studied me with that deep, searching gaze. You destabilize expectation, she said softly. Not with force, with warmth. Careful, I warned. You're starting to sound like you approve. I do. The words settled between us like a final signature on an unseen document. Around us, the palace resumed its steady rhythm. Not the rigid rhythm of ceremony, but something more fluid. Aralyth stepped into the center of the chamber and addressed the remaining officials and guards. Let it be recorded, she declared, her voice carrying without strain, that today the Imperium did not fracture. It adapted. The human representative acted first from instinct, not strategy, and that instinct revealed strength. Her gaze found mine again. From this moment forward, contact with humanity will not be governed by distance alone. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled outward. She descended from the central dais and walked toward me. No barrier, no pause. In full view of her court, she extended her hand. Not ceremonial, not hesitant, I took it. The chamber did not erupt, no weapons activated, no alarms sounded. Instead, something subtle shifted, an acceptance. You no longer react, she said quietly as we stood side by side. You choose. Is that growth? I asked. It is. I looked around the hall where, only days before, I had nearly been vaporized for a reflex. Now I stood here not as a tolerated anomaly, but as a partner. I suppose, I said, I learned that sometimes the safest move isn't the one written in the protocol. Her lips curved again, and I learned that isolation is not the same as strength. Above us, beyond the palace, two civilizations adjusted their trajectories, not colliding, not retreating, but aligning. She released my hand only after a deliberate pause. Walk with me, she said once more. This time, there was no tension in the request. As we moved together across the chamber floor, gravity stable and unthreatening, I realized something unexpected. The universe had not grown smaller. It had grown closer. And for the first time since stepping through those impossible doors, I did not feel like an outsider balancing on foreign ground. I felt steady, not because I had learned every rule, but because I had learned which ones were worth breaking.